live telecast. Give me 1 second. I was waiting for it to come.
Where do you put this?
On our Harmony Collective YouTube channel. They don't have many subscribers, but we may as well put it out there.
I could disagree, but
Really? Do you want me not to put it there?
we've been doing it, so
We only did like 3 sessions, three or four. We don't want.
mm,
Sorry. Okay, now it's live.
yeah, we'll just do a brief Mangala Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnuvadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namne. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, dear devotees, welcome. Our study of the Gita continues, and a few famous verses today. I'll share my screen. We're in the section where Krishna begins to give Arjuna the philosophy. And it's interesting to note that he doesn't come to speak anything in the first chapter when someone is asked who speaks the Bhagavad Gita or someone is explaining. Krishna is the speaker, Arjuna is the listener, and yet in the first chapter, it's the other way around, that Krishna is listening to Arjuna because Arjuna is in some level of distress, and being his close friend, Krishna is giving that space, as would be said in the modern context, holding space for his friend. And then in the second chapter, he comes out guns a blazing. He's the friendship is between two men, so sometimes men can be a little straightforward with each other, and Krishna is very straightforward with Arjuna in these first opening lines. First, he tells Arjuna that your concerns are completely unnecessary and unfounded. And in general, you're just being a wuss. You're being a punk. You should stand up and fight. But then Krishna begins to elaborate the philosophy from text 12 forward. And the essence of what's being said is being elaborated on in these verses today, which is that Arjuna's concern is all related to his vision of reality as caused by the temporary. And rather than being temporary, we're all eternal. Everything which is true is actually forever. If it's not always true, then it's not true at all. And that relative truth has its place. We all check the weather and it changes every day. It's a relative truth. So relative truth has its place for consideration, but in these moments, in this first opening sequence, Krishna is emphasizing to Arjuna the need to abide in, to remain with his vision on the eternal first and foremost before anything else is considered. And he's calling his attention to Arjuna having lost that vision. So Arjuna's heard all this before, he knows all this before, he can explain all this to any of us. And yet, in this particular moment in his life, it's become lost, as we might have experienced also, that we lose our composure in intense moments. So Krishna continues, chant the Sanskrit. Nainam chindanti sastrani, nainam dhahati pavaka, na chainam kledayantyapo, na sosyati marutaha. The soul can never be cut to pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by wind. And this description, the soul can't be touched by anything of the world. And so if it can't be burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by wind, it also can't be affected by who gets elected, by how nice the brand is of the clothes that you wear, by how much money is in your bank account. All these things are actually r- much less fundamental. What's being described here is that the soul can't even be affected by the fundamental elements of the material energy. We tend to be concerned with much less fundamental elements of the material energy. We're distracted by very petty things. Somebody said something to me, something happened on social media, a tweet came out, and we get so absorbed in those goings on, and we allow ourselves to be affected. But Krishna is calling attention to Arjuna that even the fundamental, even fire, which is uh, one of the basic expressions of Krishna's own energy within the material universe. Even fire can't touch the soul. Even water can't touch the soul. What to speak of the layers upon layers of abstraction. All our cell phone is some fire and earth come together to interact in some weird way. So the elements as we're interacting with them are abstractions far down the line, permutations of the material energy. But even at the fundament, fire itself, water itself, air itself cannot affect the soul. Srila Prabhupada never misses an opportunity to address the misconceptions of the Mayavadi. So he says the Mayavadi cannot explain how the individual soul came into existence simply by ignorance, and consequently became covered by the illusory energy. Nor was it ever possible to cut individual souls from the supreme person, from the supreme original soul. Rather, the individual souls are eternally separated parts of the supreme soul. Because they are atomic individual souls eternally, sanatana, they are prone to be covered by the illusory energy, and thus they become separated from the association of the Supreme Lord, just as the sparks of a fire, although one in quality with the fire, are prone to be extinguished when out of the fire, indicating that the Mayavadis have this weird idea that the soul's real position is as a part of an amalgam, eternally none. We're eternally non-existent, actually, and our present experience of separation and of individuation is just an aberration. It's not actually the truth. It's not actually um, desirable, also. And this rides in direct conflict with our Bhagavat conception as Vaishnavas, as Bhaktas. Through our individuality, love is possible, and all one is no fun. Why is all one no fun? Because if everyone is the same, if there's no individuation, then there's no possibility of love, because love takes two at least. There has to be a lover and something to love. The act of love, the expression of love needs an object, and it also needs someone to express through. So in modern conversations, religious communities, New Age, Neo Vedanta, love is thrown around. It's all love. It's all one. But the two are actually contradictory to each other. It cannot all be one if it's all love. Love requires individuals. And so Prabhupada again and again and again finds ways to call our attention to how the Shastra, not only the Bhagavad Gita, not only Krishna, but everywhere in the Shastra, there are what's being indicated is the potential of the individual soul. And that individual soul's sense of purpose may be one. That the purpose of loving God is one, but the experience comes through so many infinite individuals. And if we miss sight of that, then we rob ourselves. This tendency towards all one is a kind of lazy cop out. It's an escape that I just want to kind of turn off and become a robot, a prema robot, a love robot, a liberated nothing. And Prabhupada is again and again and again demanding, really, that we break our relationship with that poison. It's our favorite drug, actually, this um, impersonalism, to just kind of nullify things with a lazy vision of philosophy. And Prabhupada is again and again and again trying to call us away from that laziness and into something genuinely individual, which is worthy of the soul and worthy of Krishna's desire of the soul to become his lover, to become his servant. We'll do another text, text 27. Maybe before that, we'll pause. Anybody have a reflection or comment, or by chance a question on the last text? This text 23.
Prabhu, Hare Krishna. One thing I was thinking
Mm,
was that regard that how, although we have heard this concept of being a person, well, at least I have heard from now more than a decade, but still, I can see that the impersonalistic tendencies are still there until we really realize who we are, in our eternal sense. And
mhm.
so the war against impersonalism continues.
Yes. Yeah, it requires vigilance, and I'm glad you mentioned that. After a decade, after a decade and a half, in my case, what you wind up realizing is just how much you're affected. You're not even progress is not really come yet in a positive sense. Uh, what is that? Nescience and knowledge side by side. In the Sri Upanishad, Prabhupada uses this language that we study nescience and knowledge side by side. So to become aware of how affected we are by these negative tendencies, that's also progress. That's also helpful. We don't want to become morose, as Prabhupada would say. Um, Bhaktas are never morose. So that morose means there's a hopelessness. So we don't want to become hopeless that I'm such an impersonalist, that I'm so defunct in my ability to interact as a healthy person, a healthy individual. That's not what we want to do either. And also to be sober. And in our sobriety each day, really the most advanced are the humble ones. And humility comes not from a sense of weakness of the self, but a sense of awe, a sense of possibility in what I can become. How wonderful is the soul, and how incredible it would be to live just from the place of the soul, and how far I have to go to do that, but also how far I've come. At least I know that's where I should be going. I used to be going in so many other directions, wanting so many other things. So finding some hope is actually the best kind of motivator, the best kind of lubricant, so to speak, for the otherwise very tense and friction-filled efforts to become a good bhakta, a good soul, to feel a little bit of sense of possibility and advancement. I've come somewhere, I've done something, and I know the direction, which is all itself a success. And yes, also we have always more work to do. If even Srimati Radhika is feeling that she has something else to do, what to speak of myself.
Thank you, dear Prabhu.
Thanks. Yeah. Anyone else? Otherwise, we'll move to text 27.
Haribo, Lokabandhu here.
The
Yeah, just sometimes this terminology, that merging with the Lord, the Mayavadi philosophy sometimes becomes a little too abstract for us to understand because it's hard to relate to. I don't think anybody's sitting there and praying. I want unless they are really praying for it day to day. I want to merge with the Lord. Sometimes these tendencies can be identified in activities that we do, is even as simple as as simple as this is for me, and I want to enjoy this. That these little tendencies can also be identified as something as becoming one
mm,
with the Supreme. Just wanted to point out that we may, at least this is for myself. Of course I don't want to merge with the Lord, but sometimes these tendencies can be identified
mhm.
as, those
Yeah,
aspects.
very good. But it's actually very subtle. You won't catch your average bhakta asking to become one. Even we all know we're not supposed to, but we ask for it in different ways, don't we? As you're pointing to, Lokabandhu. One of the popular ways is religiosity. And this is one of the reasons it's very ironic how many devotees almost, they take offense. They get very bothered when other devotees are not doing things exactly the way that they do them. And the reason for that is not because of, although it will feign as concern for the other person, the real reason is that it's threatening to my own sense of what devotion is, which I don't conceive of it as an individual expression of love of God. I conceive of it as this kind of homogenized way of acting. And there's a robotic expression, and we all follow the program, which is a word that we like to use often. But prema is not programmed. So this insistence on everyone doing the same thing the same way all the time, always, because that's what it means to be a devotee. That, although it sounds good, it sounds like devotion, it sounds like Krishna consciousness, and yet it's really motivated by this impersonal tendency that we have. And uh, none of those folks who are, screaming like that, none of them would say, yes, I want to merge into the Supreme. I don't want to be an individual. But in fact, that's what they are saying, because they don't want to do the work of individuating. It came out not so much anymore, but used to be a big debate, devotional clothing and whether dhotis or khakis, and this is the whole health of Mahaprabhu's movement was riding on what clothes we wear. And uh, the the real energy around this debate and the real frustration people have with others not wearing dhotis is that then you actually have to speak to them. You have to get to know them as individuals and find out, oh, does this person really care about Krishna or not? Because they're not just wearing the uniform. They're not just presenting and looking like good devotees. I have to actually see, are they good devotees? And so to have to do that work is the work of an individualist. And impersonalists don't want to do work. They just want to turn off. They just want to flip the switch. They just want to press the button, in or out, liberated or bound, devotee, not devotee. And it's actually always on a spectrum. Existence is always present on a spectrum. Existence is always a gift at any level, and there's always a way in which our existence can be improved. That's true for us in the conditioned place, and that's true for us once we are liberated and once we are established in our spiritual relationship eternally. There will still always be the possibility of improvement. And this aversion to that continuous existence on a spectrum, there's never an end. Never was there a time when we began. That's Krishna's first words of philosophy to Arjuna. Never will there be a time when we end. That doesn't mean that we never die. That means we always grow. It's not just the simplistic vision that we never die, but it's also the vision that I always have to be growing. If I'm not growing, in some sense, I am dead already, because I'm not living into the potential of the soul. The soul is eternal, and so growth is ever possible. And I am allergic to it. From my conditioned place, I'm allergic. And then impersonalism is the attempt to establish that allergy as a reality, that to make that allergy something to celebrate. And this is why Prabhupada gives us medicine again and again in his purports, even though it may seem to be a non sequitur statement, some statement that doesn't have anything to do with what's being said. Prabhupada knows that it always has something to do with where we are as conditioned souls. Our tendency is towards impersonalism, wanting to follow some formula instead of becoming genuine, self-expressed, loving souls. So in the interest of time, we'll move forward. Thank you for that, Lokabandhu. Jatasya hi.
So one more
Yes.
comment. I know we already run our time. So since you speaking so wonderfully, can I share a comment or should we wait?
Sure. Please.
Now, I was thinking, to your point, which you shared with me earlier to my response to my comment, and your comment to Lokabandhu, it's very nice to hear that how we should have hope and appreciate the progress we have made in spiritual life. And something which I learned from my friend Damodar Priya Prabhu and also Sai Prabhu. They're very hopeful that they are very positive, that they have a hope and they have a realization that they have a relationship with Krishna. And that's something nobody can take us away. Like how as soul, as Krishna is saying, we have a relationship with Krishna. We are persons eternally. No matter how bad we may be, sometimes we become this depressed, I'm not able to make progress, this and that. But at the end of the day, I have an eternal relationship with Lord Chaitanya. I have an eternal relationship with Krishna. It's important to remind us of these simple facts. And they're very empowering statements. Try saying this in front of the deity, that I am an eternal servant of you, Krishna. No matter how bad I can be, that fact can never be changed.
Amen. Yes, well said. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityur dhruvam janma mritasya cha tasmadapari apari harye rite natvam sochitam arhasi. One who has taken his birth is sure to die, and after death one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. The remarkable element for me in this verse is the unavoidable discharge of your duty. Some people sometimes are worried, what is my duty? But your duty is bound with your daiva. It's bound up with your context, which is not of your own to choose. You may think you can choose your context, but you can't. And the modern world gives us this idea that it's possible, but it's a lie. It's a fabrication of the attempt to avoid truth and to try to decide what truth is for myself, your truth, my truth, all these relativizations of reality. So the truth is that you can't avoid your dharma. You can't avoid who you are and where you will find yourself. And there is something to do where you are and where you find yourself. And whether you do it or not, it will be expected of you, and you will be out of habit, you will engage with it on some level. It's unavoidable. So then the question becomes, in what way are you engaging with it? What is the quality of that effort and expression? And Arjuna is being invited by Krishna on the most profound level to disregard the result of those actions. You're going to die. So don't think that you're going to do things in such a way that you avoid the ultimate rejection, the ultimate failure of the living entity in their conditioned state, which is death. Everybody's struggling and groping and grasping, trying to find out, how can I live forever? How can I stay beautiful? How can I forever young? How can I not have to experience death? And in that, everything in life slowly and ultimately feels like a failure because it's unavoidable. So you're getting older and things are fading and you're less effective, not as smart as you were, not as beautiful as you were, not as funny as you were, not as powerful. It's all fading until the last the lights finally dim to a complete dark and you die. And if you spent your whole life trying to avoid that moment, if you spent your whole life trying to avoid death, then you will have wasted your precious energy that you could have spent giving yourself over to your duty, giving yourself over to your seva, not worried about the results, what to speak of the money you make, what to speak of the power and influence it brings you, but death itself you will not avoid. And so rather than wasting your precious energy worrying about that, just give of yourself each day in the moment as much as you can over to higher principles. And this is what's beautiful about Dharma, is that Dharma gives people access points, which are more easily recognizable. And each of those access points, although they may be further out than the kind of, we could say, the direct access point of bhakti. Let me give to God for God's pleasure. That's bhakti. I'm giving to God for God's pleasure, period. That's bhakti. And that's the most direct and you could say the shortest channel to approach. The channels of Dharma, although a little further out, are still direct. Why? Because they give connection to principle. They give it connection to eternal principle. And anything which is eternal is ultimately of the Lord. And so those elements of service to one's nation, family, country, business, each of these channels, they ultimately give it, if approached in a mood of dharma, in a mood of service, they ultimately give rise to recognition of the presence of God in all of reality. And so we're having a nice conversation with this on a chat that some of us are in around the Bhagavatam. And Ujjwal Prabhu is bringing attention to Jiva Goswami's distinction of something called Maya Vritti, Priti. That Priti means love, and Maya, love of Maya, is still love. It's still Priti. And the principle of Priti can be brought over to Krishna. So the act of love, even for something that's mundane, is still in some sense valuable. It's an eternal principle, the act of love. And okay, so you love your 1972 Corvette, you love your wife and children, you love your hobby, painting or sculpture, whatever. Still, that love, although connected to something relative, is an eternal act. And getting conversant with that eternal act, it prepares you for the true eternal act of loving God. And so Krishna's calling Arjuna's attention here. Why waste your time? Why lament for all the things you can't control? Why not focus on what you can control? We have this mistake of telling ourselves, I'm not the doer, I'm not the controller. Yes, you are not the doer, you are not the controller. However, Srila Prabhupada would never say that you are not a controller. In fact, Prabhupada goes so far as to say sometimes that you are a little Krishna. You are a little version of God. You have all the qualities of God, including the quality to be able to control. So what do the yogis do? What do the bhaktas do? The true self-realized and those on the path, those following the process, they learn to control what they can. What can I control? Let me focus on that. Let me give all my energy and attention there. Let me do it in a spirit of service. I'm controlling it for Krishna's pleasure, not my own. This is pretty. This is not kama. This is not for my pleasure, but this is for someone else's pleasure. And in that, we become conversant with the way to relate to eternity. So I'll stop there because we have only a few minutes left. So anybody who has any reflection or comment they'd want to give on this verse or anything that's been said, otherwise we'll pause.
Who on this? I remember that reading Chaitanya Shikshamrita, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur saying that no, sorry, no. In Nectar of Devotion, chapter number 12, Sri Rupa Goswami says towards the end that the purpose of an ashrama, doing our duty, is for the purpose of coming to love the Lord spontaneously. And until one has reached that stage, one should engage in these duties. So the ashrama has a purpose and a role. It is, to until we come to a stage where we can do everything for the pleasure of the Lord and what He wants, we should engage our skills and the gifts Krishna has given us in His service until we really, discover the spontaneity, the raga of our bhakti. Isn't it? But would you agree with that, Prabhu? Clear
Well,
understand?
of course. I mean, you're quoting an acharya, so whether I agree or not, then you've given a winning statement. But this also echoes Krishna himself in Uddhav Gita. He says this to Uddhava in the 11th canto that to the degree you don't have taste in Shravanam Kirtanam, what does he say?
That's exactly the words Rupa Goswami quotes.
Oh, Rupa Goswami is quoting that verse. Okay, very good. Maybe we could find it for ourselves and post
chapter
it.
12. End of chapter 12 of
End of
Nectar of
chapter 12.
Devotion. Yeah.
So in this, Krishna is saying the same, and that to the degree it's a degree. So it's like a sliding scale. To the degree you don't have taste, to that degree, then you follow Varnashram. And it's interesting. What does that really indicate? It's not because one would say if I'm just following it based on rules, well, better follow the rules of prema. Why not? Better follow the rules of Vaidhi Bhakti than just the rules of Dharma. But the point is that you will only actually do that which you have taste for. You will only actually invest in a meaningful way that which is of some interest to you. So if you, to the degree you don't have interest in the arena of prema and all its different facets, including myself and the devotees and the shastra and the name and the deity, to the degree you don't have interest there, you will have interest in the considerations of dharma, which are your land and your wife and your children and your country and your world. You're helpless but to have interest in those arenas. So follow those rules which allow you to engage your interest So the interest is so, our investment, our sense of purpose, chamatkar, wonder, is so important to maintain and to be aware of. What do I care about? There's a way to care about anything in this world in such a way that it brings us closer to Krishna. And that is what Dharma is about. And yes, as you're pointing, Rupa Goswami highlights, Krishna says himself, if we do that, if we allow ourselves that, then it brings us to him. Ultimately, it does bridge that gap, and we become totally preoccupied with the concerns of prema, ultimately. So thank you
Thank you so
for
much for that.
highlighting Siddhari Prabhu. Thank you, devotees, for your kind time and attention, and for carrying forward this yajna of studying the Gita. Krishna says that you worship me with your intelligence when you're studying these words, this Bhagavad Gita. So happy to do that with you all today. Radhe Shyam. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah. Well, you can close the room, close the call. You are the host now.
Okay.
Thank you.